Hey there, classes. First of all, an apology. Yesterday's video went 17 minutes. Sorry about that. There's a lot to cover, though. We hadn't done one in a while. I will try and keep this one really brief and to the point because we didn't get to all the notes today because we were continuing with a little bit of contagion and also learning about West Nile virus and how to protect yourself from West Nile. And then we talked about a really nasty one, Ebola. We used that one because it pops up a couple of times in your readings. And when we talk about the survival rate of Ebola, how they calculate that. So let's jump on in very quickly. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are going to be the first thing we're going to talk about today. My wife, unfortunately, is quite allergic to mosquito bites often. We've been lucky enough together to see some of the finest medical clinics in the state thanks to her reactions to mosquito bites. We saw them, for example, up in Yellowstone, back down in Mammoth, up in Tahoe. Why do I mention her poor reaction to mosquito bites? It's because of this. Mosquitoes do carry a lot of diseases. They carry a lot of pathogens from person to person. Way back in the old days, we thought that they carried polio. Now, if you check out these scenes right here, this is one of the scenes we started with. We learned about the polio virus. A lot of people don't know about polio virus these days. But this gentleman right here, he's been in what's called an iron lung for upwards of 70 years because of contracting polio. When you look at the way they used to spray DDT to get rid of it, unfortunately, they used to do this widespread spraying. It's like, when Pacifica, we've got Mr. Softy, the ice cream guy that cruises by, they all run after the truck. Well, this is kind of like the Mr. Softy of the day, only instead of running after ice cream, you were running after a big cloud of DDT. Kids used to think it was fun. It caused a lot of health problems, it turns out, in the long term, but we'll talk about that later. However, one of the things that they were trying to get rid of was a terrible virus, and when you look at the mosquitoes that they were trying to kill, they're not unlike the bacteria that we talked about in class yesterday. So I'll roll the next thing on over in just a second. But talking about the polio spraying back from the 1950s, you got to realize they were trying to do a good thing. They just probably weren't going about it in the best of ways. West Nile virus is a virus carried by mosquitoes that has been on the rise because, remember, it ties in with global warming. We've got global climate change is what you should properly say these days, but basically we're warming up the troposphere because of the carbon dioxide we're putting up there. Mosquitoes, they love it. They're like, right on, thank you for making it warmer because now they can survive later into the summer, sometimes even into the fall. They come out earlier in the spring. If you've ever been backpacking this year, I love backpacking with my brother this year when we can every summer, and there have been some spring times up there that you just get inundated with mosquitoes. You have to be covered up all the time, whereas in the fall, if you ever do a fall backpack, not too bad. There's not nearly as many mosquitoes. Where does this all lead? When you're trying to protect yourself from viruses that get transmitted with mosquitoes, one of the best things you can do is get rid of standing water. For example, around the school right here, they do a great job of trying to make sure there's no standing water in the drains above the classrooms, when it rains. Just little things like around your house, if there's like a garbage can lid that's upside down or something like that, and it collects fog and rain, mosquitoes love that. That's their place where they multiply. And we saw multiplication yesterday with bacteria that looked like this. Very similar in terms of mosquitoes. Now, the students, I gotta really compliment the students, really remembered the lessons on bacteria. Bacteria, if conditions are right, can multiply in as quick as 20 minutes. Mosquitoes, not quite that fast, but if you have 2 weeks and they make a new generation, that's still very fast. And when you're talking about spraying something like DDT, Rachel Carson, in her groundbreaking book here, a lot of people say this really kicked off the environmental movement in America, was talking about, okay, if you, say, have 1,000 mosquitoes inundating this classroom, all of a sudden you spray like, oh, let's get rid of all these mosquitoes. You spray some chemical that gets rid of 997 of them. Those last 3 mosquitoes might have a genetic mutation that allows them to better survive the particular chemical that you're throwing at them. In that case, guess what? When they pass on their genetics to the next generation, and then, hey, you've got another 1,000 mosquitoes, you try that same chemical on them, it's not necessarily going to work. Chances are the resistant mosquitoes have passed on their resistance thanks to genetic mutations. And again, we're looking at evolution in action. As we get into natural selection, artificial selection, this is how it works. You're selecting. When it's artificial selection, we'll see that that's people selecting for certain traits. We've done it with dogs. We do it with crops all the time. We artificially select which members of a species will survive and which won't, or which will breed and which won't. And in the case of natural selection, you're talking about, again, random chance plays an incredible role in seeing if there's a mutation that's beneficial or one that isn't. Moving on from there, before it was all doom and gloom on viruses, students had a quick bookwork. But there were two really good things that we talked about that I thought was amazing in terms of this is the type of thing, students, you might work in someday. Right here in the Bay Area, you're in one of the premier places for studying science, for studying genetics. You have biotech firms all up and down the peninsula. They, in the movie, showed a little bit of UCSF. And again, we only used a 10-minute clip from the movie today. But it's just stunning the number of places that are right here, right in our backyard. One of the things that might be good about viruses is, let me get on this side instead, excuse me, genetic diseases. For example, we talk specifically about cystic fibrosis. Remember, we call them a disease, but they're not a disease in the sense of being pathogenic. If a person next to you has cystic fibrosis, you can't catch cystic fibrosis from someone. It means that part of a gene, part of their DNA, has been written in such a way that it's making too much mucus. If that happens, remember mucus, part of our, it's on this board over here, which I'll slide back in a second, part of our innate immune system. It's a good thing. It protects us from pathogens coming in. We cough and we catch things with the mucus. But if you have too much of it, it can cause lung infections, other problems with your internal organs. There's those vests that we saw, that we read about, that actually shake a person so that you can loosen up the mucus. Here's the point. Someone get the bright idea of, well, wait a second. If viruses are really good at getting into cells and rewriting their DNA, how about if we take the, if you will, corrected version of that gene, we rewrite that DNA by putting it inside an engineered virus and then introducing that to a patient who has cystic fibrosis. And there's been some success with this, which is awesome. The other thing, if you remember from last time, bacteria, we are not doing a great job in terms of trying to keep up with evolution when it comes to trying to stop bacterial infections. We've overused penicillins quite a bit throughout its 100-year history. But there are, remember from our key terms, bacteriophages. There are viruses that specifically target bacteria. Maybe we could engineer some viruses that specifically go after the bacteria that we want to eliminate. For example, Streptococcus bacilli, strep throat, or something along those lines. So those are two very, very good aspects of viruses. Of course, when you're talking about genetic engineering, you're talking about some things that might be years down the line. And also, it will lead into what we saw with the COVID-19 tie-ins with the movie Contagion. So let me slide over the last screen. The last one really was just a copy down into the notes. We didn't have time to talk about it, and honestly, we won't have time to talk about it until we get back from our Thanksgiving break. The movie, by the way, is a great time with Thanksgiving because it takes place during Thanksgiving. Not one of my better renderings, sorry, but we talked about the adaptive versus the innate immune system. The adaptive will be, that's going to take us a whole week to go through the types of vaccines, why vaccines work so well, how they get your immune system to ramp up a response to something it has not yet seen. Whereas your innate immune system are things like our eyes, our mucus, we just talked about, and our skin, which block things, pathogens, from getting in before they can cause problems. The tie-ins with the movie, and I want the students to think, you guys have seen the COVID-19, the reality of COVID-19. This movie came out in 2011, and I wanted students to think, why did they close the schools in the movie? Also, I've constantly referred to science throughout the year in this class, and I think throughout my teaching career, as the light. Science is our guide. Science is a way that we know, hey, is this decision probably not correct or probably maybe not the best decision to make? There's a wonderful line in the movie given by the actor Lawrence Fishburne. You might know him from playing with the Morpheus in the Matrix movies. I say, hey, this is like a film studies class now. But in this particular movie, he plays Dr. Ellis Cheever. I have to look at the name because I forgot. But in the case, I didn't read this book, I got to be honest. But he does deliver a fantastic line in the movie. You may have seen that over the course of COVID-19, there's been all kinds of people who have been making wild guesses about, well, maybe this particular COVID-19 virus was engineered somewhere and let loose out of a lab. Perhaps somebody purposely engineered it. While that is not completely out of the realm of possibility, It is highly, highly, highly unlikely. Viruses mutate. It's what they do. And if you look at a virus, if you're a virus, you go into work one day, your virus buddies are sitting there and they say, hey, what are you going to do today? You say, hey, I think I'm going to try and mutate and get into a couple of cells. This is why viruses have been with us for 3 billion years on this planet. Viruses are exceptionally good at changing their genetic information so that they can get inside cells and rewrite the DNA and make more of themselves. There are viruses out there for virtually everything that's in the 6 kingdoms of life. And so at one point in the movie Contagion, when somebody's asking Dr. Cheever, hey, do you think this is some type of perhaps attack? Do you think this is something that's been genetically engineered? His line is, has someone changed the bird flu to attack us? And Lawrence Fishburne says, someone doesn't have to weaponize the bird flu. The birds are doing that. And that's an excellent line from the movie. Later on, the second best line is, again, this was all in the 10 minutes that we saw today, somewhere in the world, the wrong bat ran into the wrong pig. In other words, little bits of DNA from the bat in the pig, vectors, which we learned about a second ago, help a virus sometimes, and it's not just bats and pigs, it's other animals as well, but they help a virus jump the species barrier. And once a virus is introduced into a species it's never seen before, that's when you have the potential sometimes for a pandemic. That's when you have a virus that, for example, the humans as a species have never seen before, and so you have to all of a sudden try and get the genomic code, the genome of that particular virus, sequence it, and find out the best ways to interfere with the proteins sticking to our cells, injecting this DNA or RNA, and multiplying themselves. With that, I'm going to leave it there. I hope I haven't scared you too much before Thanksgiving break of all the things that you could possibly get from gathering in large groups. It's extraordinarily safe, so I just want to point that out. But it is an absolutely fascinating area of study. We're going to do quite a bit more with viruses when we come back after Thanksgiving. On a personal note, it's just one of my very favorite things to study. I just find it personally fascinating from my biology days all the way up to now. And when you're looking, again, around the Bay Area, I got to very much stress that you are living in one of the premier biotech places in the entire world. So just be aware that, moving on from 7th grade, in another 10 years, you could be the person out there sequencing genomes and checking out what it takes to stop a virus. Take care, and I'll see you online. Bye-bye.